Yeah, this is gonna be a long one, apparently.
It is now 7 p.m. I'm going to ask everyone if you will silence your phone. Board members, we are, first of all, I would like to have a motion that we move into our public hearing. Are there any questions? All in favor?
All right.
Thank you. We will now turn the meeting over for the purpose of our public hearing for our budget to CFO Singleton.
Thank you. Good evening to our Special Administrative Board, our Superintendent, Dr. Pruitt Adams, colleagues and community. The purpose of our public hearing is obviously to just do a quick summary of the proposed budget for the fiscal year 22-23, and also answer any questions or seek any input that there may be from presented or have passed out paper copies of each of these documents. There should be 3 pages, and I will do a very quick summary of these. I will do a more detailed summary of the budget in the actual board meeting agenda item. So as you see it, as it appears on the screen, I will start with the capital projects budget. So there are 3 documents you have before you, and they all feed into the main document that we will talk about, which is our general operating budget. So our capital projects budget, as you see for fiscal year 22-23, we give you some actual data across those columns, starting with the 18-19 fiscal year. And then we look at budgeted data for the current year in the last 2 columns, and also what we're proposing for the next fiscal year. Our capital funds project is basically where all of the capital expenditures lay. So these are items that cost in excess of $1,000. It may be a computer. It may be rooftop units. It may be HVAC systems. Those items or those purchases that will cost us in excess of $1,000, and that's where we capitalize those purchases. So we do have a capital funds project, and if you look at the top, we'll see the receipts, and at the bottom, we'll see the expenditures.
That's page 3 on here. That was the last page.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. If you are counting pages, it is the last page, and then we'll feed forward to the front page. Okay, thank you, Ms. Maria. So on the final page of the capital funds project budget, you will see that this fiscal year, we're looking at bringing in about $7 million to cover these capital expenditures. Those are our receipts. Down below, under the expenditures, and you can see in the various categories under capital outlay where we have these expenditures budgeted at. So our budget looks like about $8.6 million in capital expenditures, which means we're bringing in $7 million. We're going to spend about 8.6. We are over, if you will, or under in terms of receipts by $1.6 million. This, you will see this number as it feeds to the front page as a transfer from the general fund. So if you go to the very front page, in the very middle, it says transfer to Fund 4 on the left under the revenue and expenditure column. Almost in the center there, it says transfer to Fund 4. And all the way to the right, you will see that $1.6 million number. So that number feeds from the capital project page. Okay, so that is a transfer to cover the remaining capital expenditures that we will have anticipated next fiscal year. Let me move on to the debt service fund. So it is the second page in your package. So our debt service fund is basically the fund that pays all of our outstanding bond obligations at this point. We are a school district. We are entitled to issue bonds, issue debt for the purposes of operating our school district. And so you see actual data for the same years that we reviewed in the capital projects fund. And then you see the last 2 columns where we have budgeted data for this year and for next year. Our total receipts for this next budget year will be about $4.3 million. And then our total bond expenditures, or our indebtedness, if you will, totals to about $3.3 million. So we are, in this fund, our receipts do outpace our expenditures. And so we are $1 million to the good, which means that we're going to cover enough, or we're going to capture enough revenues to cover any outstanding bond indebtedness that we have at this time. Okay. All of this feeds into our main page. So if you will focus on the front page now, the operating budget. And again, we have the actual data for previous years, just to give you an idea of what the historical trends look like. And then the last column, if you will, the last 2 columns, the column before the last is our current year. It says 8/6/2021 amended budget. Because our fiscal year has not ended yet, we're still operating off of what we budgeted for this year. And then the final column shows the budgeted amounts in terms of revenues and expenditures. At this time, we are tentatively budgeting about $78,540,123 in revenues. And as you see, they come from various sources. Our biggest source is state revenues. That is money that we get from the foundation formula. And I'll talk a little bit more about that during our presentation. As you can see, this budget relies heavily on ESSER revenues. So if you look at those ESSER lines, you will see about $16, $17 million in those funds that we're going to be budgeting for. And a lot of those revenues will take care of some of the turnaround projects that we will be exploring into next fiscal year. Under the expenditure side, you see that we've about $76.6 million in expenditures, okay? And this is the budget that we worked on. If you recall, last week we had a public hearing, and Ms. Mora real looked at me sideways and told me to go back and make sure that that we brought a budget that the board would be pleased with. And so, again, as you can see at the very far right column, at the very bottom, it says 22.62%. That is the projected ending fund balance for the end of next year. And for all of the new board members, there is a mandate or a minimum fund balance of 15% that we must adhere to in any given fiscal year, okay? So if that fund balance ever drops below 15%, then obviously we put extra precautions and measures in place to monitor those numbers. But our fund balance, our policy tells us that we must maintain a minimum of 15% fund balance in that category, okay? I will say this is a very tentative budget, okay? By the time we adopt the final budget next, in 2 weeks, these numbers will change because there are some agenda items that are on the agenda tonight that will significantly change some of these numbers. I do anticipate that we still will meet the 15% fund balance obligation. And that is my goal, to make sure that we meet that obligation. But this is just a very tentative budget. There will be changes between now and the final adoption. And I will come back before the SAB at the 28th board meeting and do all of this, just kind of summarize this all over again, okay? But at this point, at this time, for public purposes and for the purposes of our public hearing, at this time, we will open it up for, I'm sorry, maybe that's your role, Ms. Mora. I guess this is the end of my presentation. So if at this time, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Mora and Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, the public hearing is usually for questions from the public. Right. And so the board will have their opportunity at the presentation. I didn't want a board member to ask you a question. Exactly, right now. And we would have to say this is for everyone who is here from the public. Okay.
Thank you.
This will conclude our public hearing at this time. We will now go into our open session meeting. I'm going to request not a roll call vote, but all in favor going into our open session meeting.
Aye.
Anybody abstain? Thank you. We will go into our open session meeting, and I just want to say to the board and to the public, we ask your indulgence because we have a lot that we need to wrap up this year. So the meeting may be a little lengthy, but I do want to say for the board that board member Holt has expressed to me that he needs to be someplace definitely by 9:45, and I hope that we will be done before that time. But he can be excused at that time to before that time in order to be where he needs to be at that time, and I just want to say that. Okay. First on the agenda, I want to get a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
And second. Are there any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
We will next have announcements. Are there any announcements? I just want to say that I know that I saw Dr. Coleman at the MSBA conference this weekend. I thought it was a very good conference and learned quite a bit that I'll be trying to make copies and share with the board, in particular regarding charter schools. So I have some information that I'll be getting printed and sharing with you all. Any additional announcements? Next, do we have any patrons that would like to address the board? Thank you. We will now turn it over to our superintendent.
On the superintendent's report is really short. This week, the administrators, building principals, assistant principals, and various members of DLC have been participating in a principal retreat. I was able to do an update on Monday, and they spent Monday afternoon and today doing restorative conflict resolution training. Tomorrow, I believe, student support and communications will present. On Thursday, I believe, is curriculum and instruction and finance and human resources is tomorrow, right? But it's being held at the Bellcott Recreation Center, and it's been really informative.
Thank you. Yes.
Our first item is item for information. And it is our travel item. Making this presentation is Ms. Barbara Stark. At the conclusion of her presentation, this is for information only, I'm sorry. And this is in compliance with Fiscal 1 and policy IN. Ms. Stark.
Good evening to the Special Administrative Board, to our Superintendent, Pruitt Adams, to colleagues and members of the community. Tonight, I'm presenting the travel report. This is an informational report that is given. It documents any professional travel that is occurring within the district. As you look at the form that I've provided, you'll see that the travel is presented based upon the person who is requesting travel, their title and position, building, what the name of the event, start and end date, location, estimated expenses, and then the funding source. I have also provided for you at the bottom of the page an explanation of the abbreviated titles. So you see two items there that are listed for you. You have a grand total that is presented. And so at this point, I will take any questions that you may have regarding the travel report. Thank you.
We move to section 7, which is items on discussion. The first one, our policy recommendations. This is in compliance with policy reference BF, school board policy process, and legal reference is noted on each policy. As a conclusion recommendation, is a motion to approve the policy recommendations as submitted. And for our new board members, most of the time when we do items for action and approval, unless we get special permission from the Moral Real, if we're asking that approval that same day. Otherwise, when we ask for approval, it automatically rolls to the next board. For the actual approval.
Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. Pruitt Adams, colleagues and community. Tonight, I will be presenting policy recommendations for discussion. We have policy BBA and BBF are both policies that are pertinent to our school board members' powers and duties, and a lot of what's in this policy was covered when you had your board member retreat back on May 7th. We also have policy EBBC, which is the lactation support policy. And with this policy, we will have to allow mothers time to express breast milk or breastfeed their child during the school day. We also need to provide a designated space with ventilation There also needs to be a sink nearby, running water, and a refrigerator with a locked door. For that space, it cannot be a restroom. There should be a chair and electrical outlet. Also, the public will also be allowed to use the lactation space if there's a volunteer or someone who comes into our school space that needs that space. The next policy is policy IGCD, which is virtual courses, and also IGCDA, MOCAP, virtual courses. And in these policies, it governs how we inform our parents about virtual courses, and how we enroll our students. It also deals with the type of courses that they take and that how they qualify for the courses and enroll in the courses, how the district will fund the courses. If a student is denied participation in the courses, then there's an appeal process. If a student has an IEP or a 504 plan, then a decision will be made by that team whether or not the student can participate or enroll in MOCAP. If they are approved to do so, then the team will make sure that they have the appropriate support and accommodation. So a lot of information about MOCAP there. The next policies are Jdga, seclusion and restraint, and then also Jdga, which is corporal punishment. And with the seclusion and restraint policy, what we will have to do now, if a student is restrained, then we will have to write an incident report. Also, the parent or legal guardian would have to be notified that an incident took place or a student was secluded or restrained. And then now we have to submit a report to DESE within 30 days of the incident. So that's new for that policy. And then with the corporal punishment policy, it just states that in Riverview Gardens, corporal punishment is prohibited. Okay, so with that, that concludes the policy recommendation. It is recommended that the Special Administrative Board approve the policy recommendation. Okay.
Item 7C is a recommendation for additional salary increase for 2020 year. I'll do just a quick intro and then turn to Ms. Williams. As the board has heard us indicate multiple times, our salaries have not been competitive, and we lose as many or more individuals than we actually bring on board. There are times when we bring on 7 people and we have 11 too late. And so we know that the board was gracious enough to do the 5% earlier in the year. But we went back and looked at where we could possibly give an additional increase, which will be presented tonight. I had indicated to the board earlier that I was also researching salaries for districts. And I did that based upon assessed valuation, as well as school district size and so forth. Because our salaries were so far off from many of the other districts, there was no way that I could come back and make a recommendation that the district could even apply for funds to bring everybody where they should be. And so this is a first step in the direction of trying to write that. There's another item that's coming forward. I'm not sure if I can remember it today, or if it's coming forward to do a compensation study. It is our hope that once that compensation study is done, we will have the job descriptions, we will have new steps, but we're hoping that the board will allow an additional increase in the 23-22 school year to begin to, one, let our staff know that we see them, we hear them, and we're trying to move in that direction. So at the conclusion of their presentation, it is recommended that the Special Administrative Board approve additional salary increases for the 22-23 school year, and that a $15 an hour minimum salary for custodians, school service clerical, a step movement for teachers, except those on the longevity step, I think there are 9 people who receive 3%, and our other support staff, with the exceptions of custodians, school service and clerical who are hourly, that they give a 3% increase for administrators as well. This is in compliance with policy GCBA, professional staff compensation, and policy GDBA, support staff compensation. Now turn it over to Dr. Singleton and Ms. Williams.
I don't think I have much more to add. On April 26, 2022, the Special Administrative Board, approved a 5% increase, as Dr. Pruitt Adams stated. And so we are here tonight proposing an additional salary increases as outlined by Dr. Pruitt Adams. What we would like to do is, again, show our appreciation to our staff and begin to address retention in our district, and then take additional steps to be more competitive. And so our estimated budget impact is $1.2 million for the increase. And we have-
Are there any questions? Thank you. We will come back for approval at another meeting. The next item is the staffing plan adjustment. This is for the 22-23 school year as well. Making this presentation is Ms. Monica Williams, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And at the conclusion of her presentation, we are recommending that the Special Administrative Board approve the proposed adjustment to the 22-23 staffing plan changes as presented, and this will be brought for approval at a later meeting this month. And this is in compliance with policy GCA, professional staff positions, and policy Jdga, support staff positions, and policy IHB, class size. Ms. Williams?
Okay, adjustments to the 22-23 staffing plan. The adjustments are as follows that are recommended. Art teacher to Central Middle, that allocation has always been in the budget, but somehow it was not a part of the staffing plan. So we want to make sure that that position is in the staffing plan. The district safety officers, 5 additional safety officers, that was actually approved by the board October 12, 2021. And that did not make the staffing plan. So we want to make sure our documents are accurate and up to date. The administrative assistant for communications, currently the communications department has a secretary level 2. And with the demands of that department and all the public relations that's needed, it needs a person with a higher skill set in order to increase promoting the district. And also, all of the assistant superintendents and the directors and coordinators in central office and throughout the district have administrative assistants. They don't have a secretary too, so they have a higher level of clerical support. Next, we're asking for 6 additional social workers. And here with the social workers, this is about social emotional support for our students. And we know that since our students have returned to school since the pandemic, there's a lot going on. And so we believe that by getting 6 additional social workers, we will have 1 in just about every school. There will be 2 schools that will have to share. So that will be more support for our students. MTSS coordinator, which is a multi-tier systems support coordinator. And with this position, this is funded through special school district. They will reimburse the district. And so this person will use data to help problem solve and incorporate systems of intervention in for our students. And then hopefully what it will do is identify those students that need additional support, thereby ensuring that we put those interventions in place so that they won't need to move into special education services. The next,
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Too? And that will also help us. Part of the Missouri School Improvement Process in SIP 6 requires that the district have a component in the district that is the MTSS plan. And so this person will also be pivotal in helping to get that plan developed, which will address behavior as well as academics.
the social emotional interventionist assistant, 9 positions there. This will also help with the social emotional needs of our students. And as we're moving into restorative practices and circles and just making sure we give our students the support that they need to be able to stay in school
and be successful. We're asking for those social emotional interventionist assistants. Also, master scheduler, which is a new position, but I understand we had this position previously in the district some years ago, and this will help improve scheduling, improve instruction, and strengthening the culture of collaboration. Next, we have an executive director of continuous improvement and Title IX coordinator. This is replacing the assistant superintendent of leadership and accountability. And this position, this person will be the liaison between the district and the turnaround vendor. And so they will be responsible for coordinating the program and making sure that the district is on track with our turnaround efforts. And also making sure that we are preparing the district for the M6 continuous improvement process. Next, we have a college and career coordinator. This is a new position from our understanding, bringing it back to the district. We used to have one, and this will help with promoting college and making sure our students are ready for the next step after they leave high school. Then we have federal programs. Our federal program positions for additional home to school coordinators, to a reduction reduction in teaching method coaches at the high school by 2, also 1 reduction in instructional assistant at Glasgow, and then 2 additional non-public tutors. And those are the positions. The art teacher would be funded in the GOB budget, and it has been budgeted. It's been there the whole time. It just was not part of the staffing plan. The district security officers, that has also been budgeted. Administrative assistant for communications, that one has also been budgeted, and you can see the increase there, moving from a secretary to an administrative assistant for that position. MTSS coordinator is SSD reimbursement for that position. Social emotional interventionist assistant, the 9 positions will be funded through ESSER 3. The master scheduler will be a general operating budget position. College and career coordinator, also general operating budget. Executive director of continuous improvement and Title IX coordinator is also general operating budget, and that one is budget neutral because it's replacing the assistant superintendent of leadership and accountability. With our federal programs, that one is also funded, that should say, through federal programs. And that concludes my presentation.
I know recently we just hired a communications person. So what's the difference of this title?
So yes, we hired a secretary too for communications. And when we hired her, actually, she has more duties than the secretary to position. So it's just additional responsibility that's an administrative.
It's the same title.
It will be the same
Same
position.
person,
So
okay,
it will
gotcha.
replace the secretary
Gotcha.
too. So it's not an additional position. Are there any other questions? Thank you. The next item is insurance rates. Again, Ms. Williams. At the conclusion of this presentation, it's recommended that the Special Administrative Board accept the insurance rate plan changes as proposed. This is in compliance with policy GCBC, professional staff fringe benefits, and policy GCBC, support staff fringe benefits. Ms. Williams? Okay, insurance rates for 2022-2023 school year. The plan rate year begins October 1st, 2022 and ends next year, September 30th, 2023. There is an increase in medical by 5.3%. The kids plan 5.1% increase. HSA, which is the health savings plan, 5.4% increase. Dental 2% increase. 3% decrease in vision, and no change in basic life and accidental death, and also voluntary life and accidental death. And so with that, it is recommended that the Special Administrative Board approve the rate changes as proposed. Are there any questions? The next item is Compass PD LLC, Lucy Calkins, Units of Study and Professional Learning. Making this presentation is Ms. Barbara Sharp, Director for Professional Development. At the conclusion of her presentation, it is recommended that we engage in discussion at this meeting with the Special Administrative Board in looking at the Lucy Calkins in the amount of $7,650 and this $650. And this will come forward for approval at a later point in time. This item is compliance with CSIP's Goal 1 as well as Policy IA. Ms. Sharp?
Good evening again. I'd like to say that on March 29th, the Lucy Calkins resource material was presented to the Special Administrative Board and was approved on April 12th, 2022 by my colleague Tanya Ross. Tonight, this presentation and request is primarily for the professional development that accompanies this particular item. So I am requesting on behalf of professional development the approval, a discussion on tonight in the amount of $7,650, and this would be professional development for the Lucy Calkins writing. I'll take any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you. The next item is the paper online tutoring service. This item is coming back. It is still under discussion. This is in compliance with CSIP Goal 1, student performance, Policy IA, instructional goals and priority objectives. At the conclusion is the recommendation to approve a one-year license agreement with paper to assist our scholars in learning in the amount not to exceed $272,935.08. Making this presentation is Dr. Philip Kennedy.
Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. Pruitt Adams, colleagues, and community. Paper is what the title says on the agenda item. It is an on-base, chat-based tutoring system, and it will be available for all of our scholars. And it is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they can get online and do it whenever they need to. And when they get online, they are connected with a live educator who is an employee of paper. It's not contracted out. They are trained in instructional methods called the Socratic method, which encompasses critical thinking and activating prior knowledge. These employees are trained in making sure that they are abiding by the state and federal laws that adhere to privacy for the background, and they do go through a background check. The other lure of utilizing this program is to address the needs of some of our ELL speaking students, because some of them and recently are coming to us and they don't understand English at all, so they can get on with the paper product. So the other additional feature that it offers is it offers an essay review. So if they want to upload an essay assignment, then what will happen is that they will get feedback through one of these employees. And so they'll be learning more like the editing process and how to improve their writing through this process. So what it looks like is that it kind of looks like whatever you make comments on the side, and then it has arrows going to where it is, like their suggestion. You might want to use a different vocabulary word here, or maybe use a stronger introduction sentence, things of that nature. So what happens is a student logs on, and then within 30 seconds, one of the tutor pops on and says, "Hello, my name is so-and-so, what can I help you with?" And then that's when they start getting into, the student will type back, and it'll make sure that they're working on solving the problems using the Socratic method. All of the transactions are recorded, so administrators and teachers can go back and look at that. So this is kind of an instructional tool for the teachers, because they can see where the student got tripped up. Plus, these tutors can contact and message the teacher and said, hey, I was working with one of your students last night, so-and-so, and they still are struggling. We couldn't get it figured out. And then so that can be some instructional planning piece for the teachers. It generates administrative reports, so we will know how many have accessed this a month, a day, and even the time of day. So that's going to be some really good data, because if we start seeing our high school kids, for example, they're all getting on at 10, 11 o'clock at night, then that just gives us good information there. So this is it comes with also with unlimited professional development. All I got to do is make a phone call and they'll answer. And Mark, who is our representative, he couldn't be here tonight. He wanted to be here because he's at a business meeting out of town. So it is being recommended that the SAB approve paper tutoring services for one-year contract at the amount of $272,935.08. Are there any questions?
Did I understand you to say that English language learners, would their tutoring be in their native language?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And it has over 200 content areas as well.
I had asked questions before regarding how our students are using the current platforms that they have, how they're logging in. I know, they might be logging in the classroom, but how are they using those platforms at home? And are we getting the most effective use out of them? I'm hesitant to spend more money on more online profile approach when we're not using what we have.
So
and our students at this point, we've been online for 2 years and we've been at the screen. And I just think at this time, our students would benefit more from having a person that is tutoring them and having that face-to-face help, because I'm just not convinced that our students are going to log on. You may get a senior who has to turn in a paper, who's graduating, to get on the paper tutor, but by and large, based on the number of students we have, our 5,000 students, and to not have less than 1% of them using this program.
So this will be a district program, and I can tell you that the platforms that are purchased at the district level, like Renaissance Star, Freckle, Formative, if you vote to renew it, Systems 44 and Read 180, those are monitored by me. And so I look at what kind of results are we getting those academically.
But those are also platforms that are used in the classroom with the teacher present. We're talking about now at home, no teacher present. Is the student going to log on? And are we going to use this program with fidelity, or is this just going to be another something that we say that we have is not benefiting?
So the only platform that is purchased through the district level that would benefit a student by logging on at home is Freckle. And yes, there are students that log on at home.
I'm sure that there are, but see, and that's why when I asked you, tell me, what are the percentages? What are teachers? I asked for maybe teacher input. What are teachers saying? Or I can tell you based on the platforms that I use in my classroom, I can tell you when my students get home, I can tell you the number of them that are going to log on, to complete assignments, to finish assignments, to do the research. I can tell you those students to do that. I can tell you whether or not it's effective, or do I need to give some more time in class tomorrow because out of 65 students, 5 logged on and 60 didn't, and we all need the information. Now we got to use class time, wait for the other 60 to catch up. That's what I'm talking about.
I understand. So I could look at the analysis for the Freckle and I can get that broken down for you. Now, that's the only one that I monitor there that can be used at home. And I will be doing the same thing with paper if it's approved, because we want to, it'll be used in school for like our ELL students, but it also will be used at a tremendous amount at home. So we need to make sure that we have those percentages.
So, Dr. Kennedy, in full transparency, because Ms. Coleman has asked this question, and this is coming forward to the board for approval official approval on the 28th. Can you get her that information between now and then? I heard you say you could go into Freckle
Yes,
and get that. Can you get her that information so that, and then we will send it to our new board members. When we have a request from one board member, we send it to all, and in that way they can make an informed decision.
Okay.
Okay.
I have two quick questions.
yes.
Are there any parental participation in paper?
Yes.
What is that?
So like particularly with the younger scholars, they'll be able to get on and work with them as they go through that. Or they can also go back and look at the recordings.
And the second question, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just curious of what our superintendent feels about this program.
I do think that, I think actually that our middle school and high schoolers will truly benefit from it because they will be the ones who will more readily go online and sign in. I think for our parents who are really engaged with the additional student learning at the elementary level, there will be support. For what we did take away from the last conversations with the board was a 3-year wasn't going to really tell us what we needed. And so that's why Dr. Kennedy came back today with a 1 year. And if we're not getting those results that we hope to get from this, then we have an out in our contract. We won't continue to sink money in if we're not getting what we look for.
Correct.
Is there any limit on how often or how much a student can utilize this program?
There's no limit. They can log on as many times as they want, any day and at any time.
Are they able to utilize a specific tutor, or they get whoever is on call?
It's whoever's on call. So it'll be the first available because they'll log on within, the tutor will pop on within the 6 or 30-second window. And so if they're one that they wanted was working with somebody else at the time, it obviously would work.
How is this program different from the Freckle program you mentioned?
Well, this is a tutoring service. Freckle is an intervention program. So whenever they take the STAR screener, which they do 3 times a year, it feeds into the Freckle program, and then teachers can see what standards that they need assistance on, and then they can assign work assignments in Freckle, and it'll track the data for that.
Is there any type of sample kind of interface that a person could look at now to get a sense of the program?
For Freckle,
No, for paper.
I could set you up with the demo. That's what I did. And what happened whenever I was doing the demo is that they logged me in as a student, and I got to see, and the tutor didn't know that I was an adult. So they actually treated it just as like I was a student asking for help. Would you like me to set that up?
I'd be interested.
Is that something you can do for all of our board members so they have an opportunity?
Yep.
I know you mentioned, using it in class with PLL students. Explain to me.
Well, if a teacher gives an assignment, I'm going to use a high school as an example because we have a handful of students who speak Spanish and they don't know any English, and so and the teacher doesn't know any Spanish, so that they can't interact. Then what are they doing in class? So now let's just say that they can go and communicate with them what it is they need to be working on. They can get online with a Spanish tutor and they can get their work done instead of just sit there
But okay.
or try to engage them. I guess you should say. I shouldn't say that.
So just to circle back to make sure we have everything, you're going to get the information from Freckle. So if you get it to Ms. King or I, then we'll send it out to the rest of the board.
Okay.
And then you're going to set up a demo.
Now, we can
So
do
how
that.
does that
We can
work?
do that virtually, but I'll need to know what time and a date would work for everybody.
Well, that would probably be just to the board. That'll probably be next week before that can happen.
Okay.
And I'm saying that because of vacation schedules between Ms. Fields and Ms. King. And in order to get the information from the board and get it to you and get that scheduled, I know that I don't want the board to think that'll happen this week.
Well, Mark is out of town anyway. But I mean, since it'll be done virtual, I mean, if he can come in person, he'd probably come in person. But I have to communicate with him. But I'm thinking of next week as well.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. The next item is the Amira Dyslexia Screening Tool. This item is in compliance with CSIP Goals 1, Student Performance Strategy A, Action Step 22. Curriculum and Instruction Department will continue to monitor best practices for dyslexia screening. It is in compliance with Board Policy IGAB. As the conclusion of Dr. Kennedy's presentation, the motion is to purchase Amira in the amount of $52,460 to support, which is out of the assessment budget. Dr. Kennedy?
Yes, good evening again. I'm here to present the platform Amira for renewal. This is a current platform that we use for dyslexia screening. We screen our scholars in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. And if there are identified students in the 4th through 12th grade, we can also screen them. The students in grades 1 through 3 are screened 3 times a year within the first 30 days of school, because that's the law. And then they're screened in the winter, and then they're screened again in the springtime. The kindergartners are only screened twice, and that happens in December and happens again in the spring. After we have the data from the first screening, then we can go in there and set up practice sessions for the students. And then scholars can practice on the skills that they need to improve upon. All the data that comes from those practice sessions, it is generating it in diagnostic reports. And there's a gentleman that sends me the reports on a monthly basis. I also have the lady who does the professional development. She's in contact with me on a consistent basis. And those diagnostic reports are shared for teachers so they can kind of get see what kind of movement is being made, and it's also shared with parents at parent-teacher conferences. So our returning teachers have already been trained, and our new teachers that we have coming on board, we will set up training for them so that they'll be ready to go. So it is recommended that we renew the Amira contract for $52,460. And some data points, last year we had over 1,500 practice sessions assigned.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. And the next item is the formative solution. This is an item for discussion. It is in compliance with CSIP Goal 1, Student Performance, and it is a policy reference IL. At the conclusion, it's recommended that the Special Administrative Board approve the purchase of formative solution in the amount of $31,731. Dr. Kennedy.
So the formative platform is what we house our common formative assessments in, so our CFAs. And what we use the CFAs for is to track the implementation of our curriculum, as well as allowing scholars to practice items that are math-like and EOC-like. And we're finishing up the writing right now this week and the revising of the CFAs, and we're currently using formative because we're putting them in there. But formative also allows teachers to create their own assessments, and it eliminates any pencil paper grading, and it makes the teacher's life a lot easier if they use it. The other cool thing is that it does have an interactive chat as well. So when the student is taking formative, if I'm assigning the formative in my classroom, and while you guys are taking it, I'm going to jump on your screen, and I'm going to go back and go, well, you know what, they tripped up on question number 2. I'm going to send you a message, and it's going to say, go back and look at question number 2. I think you missed a step. And so that way it's more interactive, and the student is getting immediate feedback. Last year, we didn't get out of the gates right away because it wasn't introduced, and CFAs weren't ready to be loaded yet at the beginning of the year. But despite that, the data that we have is that we had 167 teachers that were active on formative, 227 students that were active. We had 1,301 formatives that were assigned. Our students answered over 547 questions. I did mention the interactive chat. I was shocked when I saw this, but we had over 2,407 messages that were sent. So that's some good feedback our teachers are giving them. The auto-graded instances, which is teachers creating their own formatives, they created 112,428. The other key component that is critical for on-formative is that they have multiple types of question types. Because on DESE and the MAP and the EOCs, one year the student could be asked a question in multiple choice form. The next year they could be asked it in technology enhanced drop and drag. And the next year they might be asked it both ways. So it's important to ask the standard to students in multiple different formats. And that's the way our CFAs are set up, to where we're looking at a standard and we got 3 different question types to go have to answer. And then the other thing is that if we're both teaching 4th grade and I make a CFA or I'm using the district CFA, I can share it with you and we can collaborate. So that there's teacher collaboration, and there was 11 instances where classes were added. Let's see, there was one other question or statement I was going to make. These folks have a great relationship with Riverview Gardens. They also are at our beck and call. I told them that I needed a different question type because DESE had a new technology enhanced question. I called them up and they said, we'll send it to production. It should be up in 2 weeks. So they're very responsive. So it is being recommended that the SAB approve formative not to exceed the amount of $31,731. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. The next item is the dyslexia plan. Coming forth to make this presentation is Dr. Stacey Nichols, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. This item is in compliance with CSIP Goal 2, increasing the percentage of students reading at or above grade level. Also, it is in compliance with Board Policy Jdga, Instructional Intervention. At the conclusion, we would ask that the board approve the dyslexia plan with no revisions from the previous year. Dr. Nichols.
Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. Stuart Adams, and colleagues. This evening, I will share information regarding the district's dyslexia plan. Dyslexia is defined as a learning difficulty that causes problems with reading, writing, and spelling. Unlike a learning disability, intelligence is not affected. Per the Missouri Dyslexia Statute 167-950, it is the expectation that all schools conduct dyslexia screening for students. The district will screen all scholars in grades KG-3 within the first 30 days of school using the district's approved screening tool. All scholars in grades 1 to 3 will be screened 3 times a year, and kindergarten students will be screened 2 times a year. In addition, scholars in grades 4 through 12 will be screened if experiencing persistent difficulties in the area of reading, noted by assessment score, teacher determination, and or requested by the parent or a guardian. Also, the district certified staff will receive a mandatory 2 hours of dyslexia training this school year. Do you have any questions regarding the dyslexia?
Thank you. The next item is the ESSER 3 Summer School Grant. Coming forward to make this presentation is Dr. Levon Singleton, Chief Financial Officer. This item is in compliance with Policy IGC, Extended Instructional Programs. At the conclusion of the presentation, it is recommended that all programs presented using ESSER funds from the ESSER 3 Summer Application 2022 be approved in the amount not to exceed $1,100,431. Dr. Singleton.
Thank you. Good evening again. I'm here to present some good news, and that is that our school district has been awarded over $1 million from ESSER 3 funds to conduct summer school. Okay, this is very exciting because we do not have to use any of our existing ESSER dollars to supplement our summer school programs. We shared this news with our principals and our staff, and they were elated. And so As a result of this allocation from DESE, this $1 million, the high school, there's a focus to provide high school students credit recovery, credit enrichment, some freshman transition. These are all things or objectives of these summer programs, improve students' reading, math, and science skills. And so we put this out to our principals, and the high school, for instance, has come up with a credit recovery, credit enrichment, and freshman transition program. Westview Middle School and special interest camps, inclusive of reading and math. They have a program there for the summer as well. Central Middle School and their special interest camps also have a reading and math program as well. Glasgow Summer Academy, our elementary school, is offering some summer enrichment on focused learning. Michelle Obama will continue with their regular GOB funding programming with the support of food services and our safety and security at no cost, at a cost not to exceed $43,393. And then our Jumpstart Summer School program hosted by the CNI department. They also, in grades K through 5, they have some virtual and in-person options as well. This is the program that allows us to pay our staff those extra pays that we announced and the board approved. So I certainly am glad to share this good news and would encourage our board to accept this grant request. Our application has already been approved. We're just ready to spend the money. And so it is recommended that all programs presented under the funds usage for the ESSER 3 summer school application be approved in the amount not to exceed $1,010,431. Are there any questions for me at this time?
Yeah, what does ESSER stand for?
You would ask me that. It is, and I say it all the time. So ESSER is elementary and secondary. Come on, y'all, help me, somebody. That's it. School and emergency, elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds. So this is, it's kind of like the stimulus program that the federal government put out years ago. So this is the programs in response to COVID. And so the three main goals of ESSER funds are to prepare, to prevent, and to respond to any activities that related to COVID. So these funds are designed to get schools back on track to address those learning loss things that were impacted by COVID.
It is federal money.
Yes, these are federal monies. They flow through the states, but these are federal dollars.
I noticed on the budget of ESSER 1, 2, and 3, what's the distinction between those?
So it's just, so we got 3 pots of money. So they all have the same allowable uses. And so when the programs first came out, they had ESSER 1 was the first round of monies. Our district got $2.8 million. ESSER 2 was the second round to go beyond or go even further to address those activities. And then the federal government released another huge allocation. ESSER 3 funds, our district received about $35 million. Now, they do not all have to be spent at once. They're multi-year programs. So ESSER 1 is over with the program window. We spent 100% of those monies. ESSER 2, we still have another year, but we're kind of in the final stages of spending those monies. But ESSER 3, we still have about 2 more years of that program, $35 million. So we're going to do all we can to make sure that that money is spent by September the 30th of 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick question. Some of these notes programs talks about with the possibility of programming ending July 29th. So we don't have set dates for when these programs will end.
No, so ESSER runs, they give us.
Are you like the special interest camps, the Glasgow Academy? No, the CMS school and Westview, I believe. It says a possibility of programming ending July 29th. Pending.
Right. So it depends on the amount of the students that are enrolled. But just keep in mind, these programs, they're summer school programs.
Right.
And so as long as they end before the regular school year starts, and then these programs can also extend, this allocation
will cover us next summer as well. So if we don't spend this $1 million this summer, we still have another opportunity to spend these funds. Okay. All right, thank you.
The next item is the RFP 267 for food products, non-food supplies and services for the school year 22-23. Making this presentation is Ms. Shannon Abrams, and she is the food service director. This item is compliance with CSIP Goal Collaborative Cultures, address the physical needs of each student, and district policy DJ F-2 purchasing. As a conclusion, it's recommended to award KOHL Cole, Wholesale Prairie Farms, Picaro and Sons Industrial Soap Company, Commercial Kitchens, Grease Masters, Central Safety and Fire, with their respective portions of the RFP based upon pricing. And Ms. Abrams will go through all of that for you. This will ask for approval at the June 28th board meeting.
Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. JPA, colleagues and community. As stated, this item is for discussion, RFP 267. This is the annual food service RFP that I put out to secure vendors for the upcoming school year. So for the 22-23 school year, the vendors provide food for our school breakfast and lunch program, and then snack at the early childhood. And then also a lot of the vendors, as far as like Grease Masters and Commercial Kitchens, they provide services to keep our equipment running throughout the department. So maintenance and repairs throughout our department. Are there any questions about the vendors or RFP 267? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will say this meeting is going a lot faster than we anticipated. The next is the resolution authorizing the superintendent or designee to approve payment of bills. Making this presentation is Dr. Levon Singleton. This is compliance with policy DK payment process, and we would ask that the board approve this later in this meeting. Dr. Singleton?
All right, good evening again. This particular item, I believe we gave our superintendent, Dr. Pruitt Adams, the ability to hire and that hiring be ratified by the board at the next meeting. Because we know that payment of the bills, transfers or supplements are a vital part of the financial operations of the school district, we did not want to miss any time windows in between board meetings. And so we wanted to make sure that we had our superintendent and designee had the ability to approve these items with the understanding that they will come before the SAB for ratification at the next meeting. There will be an opportunity probably at the end of this month where we will need our superintendent to pre-approve some things. We're trying to close out the fiscal year by June 30th. And so we will certainly need, in between the time that we go to the board, we will need those approvals for certain expenditures to happen and take place. So this item here is giving Dr. Pruitt Adams the ability to approve and the SAB ratified at the next meeting. Are there any questions for me at this time?
Just to comment to our new board members, this is usually happens in summer months. So I don't want you to think it's all year long. It's really in place for summer.
And I just wanted to say that this was a concern, I'm glad that you have this on here, because it was a concern for the board in the past if things were not paid on time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Singham,
Yes.
just for information, what would happen if the board didn't ratify? What would that process be? I mean, I'm not planning.
Sure. No, it's a good question. So then we run the risk, if we don't have proper approvals, then we run the risk of, being in default of our bills and obligations with our debtors, or we would simply just have to wait until the next board meeting. This is kind of a tricky time of the year because we're ending one budget and going into the next. And because the SAB meets only one time in July, typically we can get these on a schedule every 2 weeks, but we only have one board meeting in July. And I don't know if is there 1 or 2 meetings in August?
2 in August.
Two in August. So right. especially during this critical time and knowing that we only have one board meeting in July, we have to have the ability to be able to pay our bills and get those items ratified at the next board
I
meeting.
understand the necessity for it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Madam President, I think what Mr. Oswald is saying, if the bill is paid and we don't ratify, what happens?
So if the bills are paid
Yeah, it's
and
paid.
you don't approve
We
it,
don't approve it at the next meeting, what happens?
then we have shot ourselves in the foot and we have paid a bill and it was not authorized or it was not approved. So some kind of way we got to figure out how to unpay that bill, which is probably impossible.
And I don't know if this will help the board. The most part, Dr. Singleton is not allowing us, myself included, right
That's
now
right.
to open anything new. So whatever bills are being paid are bills that we already either have a contract for or bills that continue to go on. But he is clear, even with some of the other bills that we have, like legal bills, that won't come in until the end of the month. They won't get paid right now. And that's one of the reasons we're saying this, that, you know, we want our bills paid on time. We know we have legal counsel, and if they need to be paid prior to that meeting, I think it's July 12th, then we have the latitude to pay them, because we probably won't get it before the June 28th board meeting. So it wouldn't be anything new. We wouldn't go out and purchase something and say, oh, let's pay this bill now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
At the conclusion of any of those bills that are paid under this authorization, is there a report made of what actually occurred? under
Yes. So typically, Mr. Harsley, what happens is, and just like in today's board report on the agenda, there's an item called payment of the bills, okay? So at every board meeting, the board gets all of the bills that are upcoming for payment, okay? And we don't release those checks. So tonight's approval of payment of the bills that are on the agenda, those checks will be released on tomorrow. So you always get a report. So what we're saying is, in the interim, between now and the next meeting, if the superintendent could pre-allow those bills to happen so that we can keep our credit worthiness with our debtors and things like that, that happens. But yes, you do get those bills are presented to the board at every board meeting. Thank you.
Any other questions? The next item is proposed 22-23 budget, draft 1, and this too is by Dr. Singleton. It is in compliance with board policy DB annual budget. At the conclusion, it's recommended that the approval of the final budget will be presented at the June 28th meeting. Dr. Singleton?
All right. So Dr. Pruitt-Adams, we're making good time.
Yes, we are.
So I will spend the next 2.5 hours. I'm just teasing here. I think we've heard a lot about the budget, and so let's just kind of get into the presentation tonight. So let me just remind the board, this is a draft. I cannot be more clear that these numbers will change. If the board approves the additional increases and those items that were presented tonight, then the final draft will look a little bit different than this draft. So this is as of a snapshot in time, okay? And so one of the things that a budget in any school district must do is agree with the mission and vision of the school district. Our budget should be aligned to the mission and vision of the school district. So Riverview Gardens School District, along with its families and community, nurtures academic excellence in all students, prepare them for college and career ready in an ever-changing society. That's what the budget should be doing. The budget should be supporting those missions and supporting those goals. And you see that information there as well, okay? The vision, creating a community of learners equipped to be competitors in a global society and leaders demonstrating social and civic responsibility. That's what these expenditures are designed for. You know, we want to help our kids to become competitive in a global society and also become leaders as well. Okay. Our value statements, again, the budget should align to those value statements. It should be student focused. It should meet the needs of the whole student. Okay. We're talking about learning climate and all of those items as well. In addition, keep up with me, Barry. Collaboration. the school, communities, and families and community work together, supporting each other. So the budget should be collaborative. And you will find that we met with all of the budget managers, and obviously we gave community members an opportunity to express and say those things that they wanted to see happen in our school district. And so our budget should be aligned to that as well. Also integrity. So you should be able to trust the numbers. We should be transparent and ethical as well. And so those are things that you will see in the budget. Next page. Okay, so our operating revenues, that is the same information that you have in the public hearing. So what I want to do is just quickly go through the last column so that you can see some of where we are at this particular point in our budget projection. So on the left, it says revenue. Those are the 10, 12 different revenue sources that make up the total budget for next fiscal year, okay? So where does Riverview Gardens get our money, okay? We get it from current and delinquent property taxes. That's you and me paying our tax bills. That's you and I paying our personal property tax bills. As a school district entity, we are entitled to some of those revenues when we pay those bills. Prop C is the sales taxes, okay? That's the 1% sales tax, all right? And so those monies go to school district as well. We've got some small funds that we label other local and county. Every now and then we get some additional funds from the sale of certain items or from some county sources. And so we include those numbers in our budget as well. I want to pause where it says state revenue, because obviously you see $30 million next to that category. That is by far the largest funding source for our revenues in the school district, okay? And so we get those monies as a result of this complex formula that the state has come up with. And of course, we've always said that formula doesn't favor school districts like ours because there's really not a local tax base to pull from. And so we have to depend on the state revenue to do the majority of some of the things that we try to do in this school district. Federal, next to federal, you see about $8 million. Those are our title programs. So we get those monies just for being a low-income district, serving low-income students. So we've got Title I programs, Title II, which are teacher quality programs, Title IV. So we get about $8 million we're looking at in title revenues. Now that number will change as we get into the school year. Right now, DESE has put out preliminary numbers. And so the number is pretty modest right now. We know that that number will increase once we know what our final numbers are going into the school year. ESSER 1, there's no money budgeted for ESSER 1 this year. I've shared with you that we've spent all of those funds. ESSER 2, we've got about $1.3 million that we're looking at for the current fiscal year. And then ESSER 3, about $16 million. I mentioned earlier, Mr. Harsley, we've got about $35 million in ESSER 3 funds that, again, are designed to prepare for, respond to, and prevent COVID measures. And so there's some allowable things that we can do with those ESSER dollars. I will emphasize that we are able to do some of the things that we're doing now because of ESSER funds. And I want to caution the board, when ESSER funds go away, all right, we got to shift our thinking. We got to shift our priorities, because when those funds go away, okay, we still have to operate as a school district. And so, you know, I've tried to impose that on my colleagues. They hear me talk about it all the time. We have to have a contingency plan when those $35 million that we've gotten in ESSER funds go away, okay? You see CARES Act, there's nothing budgeted there. Student activities, we get dollars. We budget a small amount of monies for student activities. Our schools have fundraisers and things like that, events, and we budget those monies as well. And then we've got a little small category, a catch-all that we label others. So the total revenues right now are about $78.5 million. Now I want to make one point, because if you look one column over to the left, you'll see that the current budget that we're in is about $65 million. So you see that there's about a $13 million increase in the current budget versus the new budget. And again, I attribute all of that, or the majority of that, to the ESSER programs that we're putting in place. All right. At some point, we got to get back down to that $65 million and probably even beneath. Okay. Next slide. So those are the revenues. Let's look at the expenditures. Okay. What are the expenses? What does Riverview Gardens spend their money on? Okay. I'm glad you asked the question. So in the far right column, you will see that the first 4 rows under expenditure, okay, salaries, health insurance, pension, retirement, and other benefits, we label that as salaries and benefits, okay? And trust me, that is the majority, the vast majority of any school district's budget is spent on salaries and benefits. That's how our teachers get paid. That's how our students get served. That's how I get paid, and everyone else, salaries and benefits. And you see the numbers there. Also, purchase services. Purchase services are those outside, usually contractual obligations that we have that we bring aboard to service our students, okay? They can be transportation services, for instance. We have a number of consulting contracts that come out of purchase services. And so those are contractual items that our district relies on to support some of the activities that we have here in the school district. Also tuition. That's not the outside tuition that we pay that was related to transfer, okay? That part is over with. As you all know, in 2010, when our school district lost its accreditation, our scholars were allowed to go to neighboring districts and we had to foot the bill. Well, that's over with. But these tuitions here are for some of our, first of all, one of the biggest piece of that is our ACE program, okay? We pay ACE tuition for our scholars to go through the alternative programs. And we also do have some other programs in which we're responsible for services to our scholars. Some of our students in transition, our foster care programs, we have tuition payments for those scholars as well. Under supplies, you will see that's how we operate. You know, that's where we buy our computers from. That's where we buy our pencils and papers and all of those items that fall under the supplies category. We also, utilities, we have to keep the lights on. We have to keep the air conditioners going. And so under utilities, we have a budget there as well. So our total expenditures are about $76.6 million. So if you look at your paper, you'll see $78 million in revenues, about $76.6 million in expenditures. That is the trend that we want to see. We want to see the revenues outpace the expenditures. I will say that in the past, that's not been the trajectory of the school district. Our revenues were far less than our expenditures, especially during the times where we were paying for our students to go to other places, okay? So the transfer program is really a culprit of our dwindling fund balance over time. I mentioned earlier in the when I looked at that capital funds project that I explained to you all, that we were about $1.6 million less on the revenues. And so that will show as a transfer from the general fund to the capital projects. We budget that. That number could grow depending on the amount of capital purchases that we make within the school year. So that is a number that the board sees on a monthly basis. I present that in the fund balance report. And so again, at the June 28th meeting, we will also be presenting a final capital expenditure request so that we can transfer enough money to capture all of those expenditures, okay? Next page, this is the fund page. This is the page that the board likes to see because it helps us meet the goal and the policy that says we've got to keep a minimum 15% fund balance. So if you look at the far right column under budgeted 22-23, opening fund balance of 17.1 million, ending fund balance of 17.3. The change is about $220,000. leaving us with roughly a 22.62% fund balance. So we are above the 15% minimum, but keep in mind, this will change once we approve the additional expenditures that we talked about today. The raises, if the board does approve, and also the changes in the staffing plan. There's some additional positions that Ms. Williams presented that will also be included. We don't expect the fund balance to dip below 15%, so we'll do our best to make sure that a realistic budget is presented. I explained the debt services fund already during the public hearing. Basically, if you look at the revenues and expenditures, we are good in debt services. So we levy enough money. We get enough money through the formula that we talked about, and also we levy enough through the tax levy in debt services that it covers the amount of debt that we have outstanding. I will share with the board that at some point, when money or when and if money becomes an issue, then we also have the opportunity to issue additional debt. But we'll talk about that certainly when that time comes. So we're good on debt services. The next screen talks about capital funds project. I've talked to you about those. Those are our $1,000 or more expenditures. We see the total receipts and expenditures for next year. And then we see the fact that we will transfer from the general fund to help cover the excessive expenditure over the receipts in the capital funds project, okay? This slide here just talks about how the formula works. That information, again, is presented in the board docs, so you're welcome to go back and look at that information. I won't spend a lot of time on here, but basically, this is Missouri's way of distributing funds to local school districts, and it takes into account several factors, okay? Student attendance is an important factor, okay? If you want more money from the foundation formula, then attendance has to be a priority. It looks at the ability of local agencies to raise taxes. It looks at local tax rates and things like that when you consider how much money you get from the foundation formula. It looks at disadvantaged or special needs students. Again, we talk about the title programs and also if districts provide summer school and other activities. So those are some things that go into the formula to tell how it works. It's a complex formula, but in simple terms, it looks at weighted average daily attendance, the state adequacy target, the dollar value multiplier, minus any local effort. And again, those numbers are all explained there. I won't get into the full detail of how those numbers are there, but that information is there. Again, attendance is important and so forth. And so we want to make sure that we're encouraging our scholars to be at school all day, every day, okay? Some things that impact our budget. We must know that assessed valuation always is an important piece of any budget, okay? And so I'm glad to show that over the last several years, we have seen a steady increase in assessed valuation. You ask what assessed valuation is. It is the summary, it's the appraisal, it's the value of all the properties that are within the taxing district of Riverview Gardens School District, okay? And so we're glad to see that our homeowners in the community have seen an increase in their property values. And so that's really how we derive at assessed valuation, about $240 million in this school district. Next slide. So the things that we really must pay attention to, again, are revenues and expenditures. I explained those to you. Our fund balance changes. And again, we're able to do what we're able to do now because of ESSER funds. And I don't want to undermine that. When ESSER funds go away, we got to come back and we got to make sure that we reduce those expenses that we overspent on because ESSER funds was here and it was available at that time, okay? I always like to remind the board about those propositions that we took advantage of. Prop R, we did $11.7 million in renovations. We took about $9 million and made capital improvements. And we've got a little bit of those funds left. So Prop R is running out. It's just about gone. And we've done a number of HVAC, technology, paving, roofing, safety and security projects throughout our school district, okay? Next slide talks about Prop E. I always like to brag that Prop E and a lot of us in this room and on the board were boots on the ground this last April, not this past April, but the April before. And we got out and made sure that Proposition E passed and allowed the school district. It was a tax rate increase. And so the homeowners in this school district, by a supermajority, did allow us to increase the tax rate. And we are seeing the fruits of those labors through our tax levy at this time. The priorities that we talked about, trying to regain full accreditation, expanding early childhood, and my colleagues, I know Dr. Nichols is working on those things as well. We're trying to work on transportation, health services. Dr. Patton is working on those, enhancing our salary schedule. We've done that, and trying to establish community and adult programming. So those are the priorities that Prop E ran on. And I want to remind us that we have an obligation to meet those priorities, okay? The next slide talks about the ESSER programs. Again, ESSER 1, Mr. Harsley, as you mentioned, that's gone. We got about $2.8 million. We do have a small portion that goes to the non-public schools that we support. And with ESSER $1, we bought Chromebooks. That's really how we got one-to-one in this district. At the onset of the pandemic, we were not a one-to-one district, okay? And so through donations from computers from the library and hotspots, in addition to us buying some of our own, we were able to go one-to-one. And so that was a lot of what ESSER 1 involved. The next slide talks about ESSER 2, $15.6 million. Those monies are about a year and a half from now, they have to be spent. And what we've really done with ESSER 2 is reimbursed ourselves for some of the expenditures that were allowable, okay? And that's how we're able to kind of maintain this fund balance, really is through some of the ESSER 2 reimbursements that we've taken advantage of, okay? And we've got some capital projects there as well. The next slide talks about ESSER 3. I mentioned we've got almost $35 million, and those are the programs that we're meeting on every day. The Turnaround Initiative is in ESSER 3. Professional development, mental health services, virtual teachers, social workers, all of these funds and activities will be supported through our ESSER 3 program, and those funds don't run out until September the 30th of 24. So each year you will see a budget that has ESSER 3 expenditures in it, okay? So again, the important things that I want to talk about here is that this is a preliminary budget. I mentioned before that the final budget will change, and I will stand before you and go over those changes made to this budget draft. And so school districts are required to adopt final budgets before June 30th of every year. And so we're hoping that at the June 28th meeting, we will have another discussion, and then we will adopt our budget for the next fiscal year, okay? I believe that's the end, and again, we just continue to do what's best for children. I think that's what we're all here for, and that's why we get up every day. So at this point, are there any questions for me about the budget?
Madam President. Dr. President.
I like Ms. Lang. What's up, Ms. Lang?
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Regarding the efforts. First of all, ACC. That's not part of the abbreviation list. So what does that stand for?
So the ACE, is it the ACE program?
Yeah.
I believe, Dr. Patton, help me, alternative, is Jared here? What does ACE stand for? Okay, so it's the Accelerated Center for Education program. Jared, will you come on and stand up? Come on, I'm on the hot seat. You can get on the hot seat as well. Can you just give them a brief explanation of what the ACE program is and what it does? And this is Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith is the ACE. He's the Director of Alternative Education and ACE. He handles the ACE program.
Good evening, board, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, colleagues and community. So just real quick, ACE is the organization that we partner with to provide alternative school services for our students who either can't or choose not to work in the traditional school. We operate 3 sites within the Riverview Gardens School District footprint, one on Chambers and Bell Fountain, one on 367, and one on West Florissant. So we try to service every part of the community. And it's non-traditional learning. There are teachers in the room with the students. A lot of their work is done virtually because it's a credit recovery program first and foremost. So a lot of the students that we have in ACE are students who are deficient in their credits and they're trying to graduate on time. And so, you know, in a regular high school, at Riverview Gardens High School, students can only earn 4 credits per semester. Whereas at ACE, they work at their own pace, so they can earn as many credits as they can, and they can work at home as well as in the school. They can work at home like in the evening and on the weekends, as well as in the school building.
So this is a physical building?
Yes, ma'am.
So what's the physical building at Bell Fountain?
It is inside the church on Bell Fountains and Chambers.
Okay, so a citizen would not know that if they did not know that.
No.
Okay, because, and the reason I'm asking is there are some citizens in the community who don't think we offer that program, this program. And you just are telling me we do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so do we not advertise it? Do we not publicize it?
Well, the program is offered to Riverview Gardens School District students. It's not a community program. So it's not like someone who's not a Riverview Gardens School District student.
I mean, I guess probably what I don't understand is the student meets this criteria.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm assuming that families would know that program is there. Is that a fair assumption?
If they don't know it exists, so there are a couple of different ways that a student can get into ACE. They can get into it voluntarily. A parent can request that their student attends ACE, or if they're credit deficient, then at some point their counselor in high school will say, hey, you need to catch up, so you need to go to ACE. At that point, myself and ACE staff, we reach out to that family and we tell them about the program, talk to them, get them signed up and all of that good stuff.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that.
No problem.
And so the other question I had was regarding, I briefly Googled the ESSER. You can't use your phone here, and I'm supposed to use your phone in there. Okay. I couldn't get on, but thank you for telling me that. The ESSER program started in 2020,
Yes,
which is like right when the pandemic started.
exactly.
So this program is pretty much pandemic centered.
Absolutely.
And before this program existed, we didn't have anything else like this.
Right.
Am I correct?
Right. Yes, ma'am.
So when I looked at ESSER 3 and the benefit of that $35 million, I remember social workers.
Yes.
If we use those funds to hire social workers and the ESSER 3 funds are eliminated, then does that mean that the social worker position goes away? Yeah.
So yes, let me the direct answer to your question is yes. So ESSER revenues are temporary. They are designed for over a 3-year span to help school districts prevent, respond to, and prepare for anything COVID related. And like you said, March of 2020 was when the pandemic first hit, okay? And that's when they created these funds. So anything we do with ESSER now, okay, we're hoping that when these funds are over with, that we have met the responses or the obligations of the funds, and then that those big ticket items go away. So we're going to always need social workers, and we have social workers. We have social workers on the regular general obligation budget, okay? But we're hiring additional social workers with ESSER funds. And when those funds run out, then of course those social worker positions will leave. It doesn't take away from the ones that we already have that are not ESSER funded. And so again, some of the turnaround initiatives, we hope maybe that we can do some resemblance of turnaround with the normal budget, but the bulk of what we're spending monies on related to turnaround, if the district does not have the funds to continue those, then of course those funds or those activities will probably cease as well.
I do want to add that when the social worker positions will be posted, should the board approve that, it will be posted as a 2-year position. So anyone going into it will know in advance that it is a 2-year position. You know, it's one of those things you hate to take away once you give it. But as we've looked at not only in Riverview Gardens, but the school districts across the country with the social, emotional, and mental health issues that have impacted students all over, even faculty and staff, we feel it would be beneficial, even if we have 2 years of additional support, than to not to have that additional support at all.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Yes. Thank you, Ms. Lang. Are there any other questions regarding the budget? Okay, all right, thank you.
Wait a minute.
Oh, yes, sir.
You mentioned 35 million for the ESSER 3. Now, is that portion, I see 16 million
Right.
Relative to the 2022-23 budgeting. Is the remainder of that 35 million in the 23-24?
Right, it will come forward in the 24. And again, some of that we may use more the next fiscal year. Right now, we're only targeting that much. But again, once we make the additional adjustments and see what the needs are, once we get into the fiscal year, if we've got a severe need and it meets those ESSER eligibilities, then we may introduce more monies. But yes, to answer your question, the remaining $20 million that you don't see will probably be budgeted in the next fiscal year.
But that's already been granted to the district.
Yes. So that $35 million, that's not money that they can go back and redivvy up. You know, that is money that we have been awarded, and that's in our coffers.
Okay. I have another question relative to the fund balance. So budget now for 2022-23 is referenced at 22.62%. And I read from your comments that you think that it's probably going to be in the 15% range when the budget is final, when we finally get through with this, right?
So let me say this, it'll be above the 15%. But once we see what the additional expenditures are that the board will approve, and we also look at the additional ways that we could reimburse for some activities that are eligible, you know, we're hoping that, what I'm saying is I believe that it'll be above 15%, but it may not rest at the 22%. So I can say above 15, but I won't guarantee that it'll stay at the 22%.
So isn't it the case that on average in the state of Missouri, that the fund balances run in the range of about 30%?
Well, that's probably in some of the richer school districts, I'll say that. In some of the districts that I mentioned to you that our dependency is on that money from the foundation formula, okay? If we got $30 or $40 million in local taxes and things like that, then we probably could carry those kind of fund balances as well. And at some point, our district, we kept steady fund balances above 25 and 30%. But what hurt our fund balance over time is that transfer program. When I first got here 2 years ago, I calculated almost $27 million in 10 years that were a part of the fund balance that every year that just ate away at your fund balance. And so fund balance not only includes what you have this year, but it also includes what you started with this year, okay? So you've got a starting point plus the activities of the current year,
Sure.
Okay, that determine how you're going to end the fiscal year. And so it matters where you start. And we had a good start a long time ago. And unfortunately, those activities, through the transfer program, were really something that negatively impacted our fund balance over time.
I understand that. One other question. I appreciate your patience. With respect to the purchase services.
Yes.
So I noticed the projection for next academic year is $16 million.
Uh-huh,
Roughly. And that's quite a bit more than the previous years,
sure.
quite a bit. So in a general sense, what is that additional amount for?
So it's just like the,
Could I give an example of one?
absolutely, Dr.
Okay,
Pruitt.
so purchase of services, contracts, and things like that. So back in March, the state identified 3 of our elementary schools as turnaround schools because they were in the low part of the state, so the bottom 5%. That was Meadows, Highland, and Lewis and Clark. And so the state is going to pay for that. The work that with the turnaround, you heard Dr. Singleton speak about turnaround schools. The state's going to pay for that over 3 years. However, all of our schools need to have the same type of intensive turnaround. And so we're looking at ESSER dollars to, and that'll be coming at the 21st board meeting, to do that same type of work at our other 9 schools. But that's going to cost us about $6 million over 3 years. So that's coming out of ESSER. We think that's a good investment in our scholars because it will allow the district to have a focused effort system-wide to move forward with student performance and ELA and math, as well as culture and climate, dealing with issues of equity. And so that's money we're going to impact that fund balance. Should the board approve that before the 28th board meeting? So that's why Dr. Singleton is saying that it will change from time to time. Now, the state has said that if some more monies are allocated towards turnaround schools, they may be able to give us a little bit more to help our other schools. But we can't wait for that. We can't guarantee that. And if we truly want to move forward as a district to regain our full accreditation, we have to do it systemically. We can't do it one school at a time.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that will impact the budget as well. The other thing, going back to your question before that, when Dr. Singleton was talking about the program where kids could transfer out, we also don't have any major economic development like Hazelwood has Amazon and things like that. Ferguson, Florence has, some economic development. That's another thing that impacts us as well. So it's a lot of things that will impact the amount of money we have. What we also are going to do that he didn't mention is look at zero-based budgeting, centralized purchasing to look at how we are currently spending so that our expenditures, while right now they're a little bit below our revenue, that we continue to be able to build our fund balance as we move forward by really looking at how we're doing our spending.
Yeah, I think that would be very prudent because from what I gather, you're saying that the ESSER money is going to end in 2023-24. We know that to be the case.
Right.
So I'm sure that long-term financial planning, budgeting for that is taking place with the view that that's a reality that's going to happen.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your questions. If there are no other questions, thank you.
If there are no other questions, that concludes the information and discussion. Okay. We will now move to item 10, which is, we will now move to item 8, which is approval of the consent agenda. And item number 9 on here lists those things that were on the consent agenda. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
May I have a second? Second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstainers? We then will move to item 10, which is items for action. Item A is ESSER 3 summer school grant. May I have a motion?
So move.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item B is resolution authorizing the superintendent or designee to approve the payment of bills. May I have a motion?
So move.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Finally, we are at item 11. With no further business to discuss, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
said that quick. May I have a second? Second. It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Did they give you?